The vegetable stand at the end of Birch Hollow Road looked like any other. Wooden crates brimming with ripe heirloom tomatoes, handwritten prices on cardboard signs, and a young girl's bright, proud smile as she counted change for her elderly customers. But on a sweltering Georgia afternoon, when 4 black SUVs rolled up to Annie's produce stand, they shattered more than just an 8-year-old's dream of running her own business. They awakened something that should have remained buried: a mother's military past, one marked by 78 confirmed kills on the world's deadliest battlefields. As Gabriel Velez's cartel moved to claim what they thought was a new smuggling route, they made a grave miscalculation. They threatened the wrong little girl. 3 days later, when the gunfire finally stopped echoing through Red Creek, the county sheriff stared in disbelief at the scene before him. 15 of Mexico's most wanted criminals lay in custody, a multi-million-dollar drug network was in ruins, and a quiet farmer stood in her vegetable garden, calmly pulling weeds as if nothing unusual had occurred. This is the story of how a mother's fierce love for her daughter unleashed hell on one of the most dangerous cartels in North America, proving that the deadliest adversary isn't always the one making threats. It's sometimes the one selling fresh produce with a sniper rifle buried beneath the farmhouse floorboards. The morning sun cast long shadows across Annie's stand as she arranged her tomatoes with careful precision, exactly how her mother, Tessa, had taught her. The stand itself was humble. Weathered boards salvaged from an old chicken coop, painted in a cheerful shade of yellow by Annie's own small hands. A simple chalkboard displayed the day's prices, each number written in a child's neat handwriting. Tessa watched from the porch, sipping her coffee. Her eyes, sharp and alert despite her relaxed posture, swept the horizon. Old habits died hard. Even after 5 years out of military service, she could sense trouble before most others could. She noticed the telltale dust trail of Hank Wilkins' pickup before it crested the hill. "Morning, Miss Tessa," Hank called out as he climbed down from his truck, his voice gravelly from years of smoking. His wife, Martha, stepped out on the passenger side, her silver hair glinting in the light. "These tomatoes look fantastic today," Martha said with a smile. Annie beamed proudly. "I grew them myself. Well, Mama helped a little." Tessa made her way down the porch steps, her movements graceful and deliberate. Hank's gaze flicked toward her for a moment, his eyes narrowing slightly. He'd always been too observant for his own good. "Beautiful day for business," Martha said cheerfully as she selected a few tomatoes. "Although, I did notice some unusual traffic on Woodbine Road yesterday. Black SUVs. Not something you see around here too often." Tessa's fingers tightened slightly around her coffee mug. She'd seen them too: 3 vehicles, heavily tinted windows, and foreign plates disguised with layers of caked mud. "Tourist season," she said lightly, brushing it off. "Probably got lost on their way to the river." Hank's eyes met hers for a brief second. Neither of them believed that explanation, but he didn't push the matter. The day continued in a steady rhythm. Regulars stopped by to buy produce, praising Annie's growing arithmetic skills as she made their change. But under the surface, Tessa's mind was constantly working, calculating sight lines, possible angles of attack, and distances. The old oak tree by the road offered good cover on the southern approach. The dilapidated tractor shed gave a clear view of the eastern field. She quietly memorized each position while tending her peppers. Around noon, another black SUV passed by, this time slower. Annie waved enthusiastically at the occupants, but the windows were tinted too dark to see if anyone waved back. "Mama, can we have lunch soon?" Annie called out. "I made almost $50 today." "Sure thing, sweetheart. Just let me finish watering these peppers." Tessa crouched in the garden, seemingly absorbed in her task, but her peripheral vision tracked the SUV as it circled back again later in the afternoon. This time, a well-dressed man stepped out and approached the stand. His shoes were polished and expensive, completely out of place in farm country. His smile was smooth and practiced. "What beautiful vegetables," he said, his faint accent betraying his origins. The man's accent was unmistakably Central American. "You must work very hard," he said smoothly. "Thank you, sir," Annie replied politely. "Would you like to buy some?" "Perhaps." He tilted his head. "Tell me, little one, does your mother own all this land?" Before Annie could answer, Tessa appeared silently beside the stand. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone friendly but firm. The man's smile didn't waver, though his eyes hardened slightly. "Ah, you must be the owner. I represent a business collective interested in agricultural properties in this area. We believe there's an opportunity for mutual benefit." Tessa's expression remained neutral, but she subtly positioned herself between the man and Annie. "Not interested in selling family land." Of course, he replied, raising his hands slightly. "But perhaps we could discuss alternative arrangements. Your location is quite strategic." "Like I said," Tessa replied with the same even tone, "not interested." Something in her stance caused the man to instinctively step back half a pace. He quickly recovered and reached into his jacket. Tessa's muscles tensed, but he produced only a business card. "In case you change your mind, we can be very generous." He placed the card on the stand and strode back to the black SUV that had been idling around the bend. Annie picked up the card and frowned. "Mama, what's import-export business mean?" Tessa took the card, memorizing the number before slipping it into her pocket. "Nothing you need to worry about, sweetie. Let's close up for the day." That evening, after Annie was asleep, Tessa pulled up the floorboard beneath her bed. The rifle case was just as she'd left it 5 years ago. She didn't open it, yet. Its presence alone was enough to steady her nerves. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from Hank Wilkins. "Stop by tomorrow. Martha's making pie." Their old code from her military days. Something was wrong. Tessa moved quietly to Annie's room and stood in the doorway, watching her daughter sleep peacefully. The moonlight glinted off the little chalkboard sign Annie had made. "Annie's amazing produce, grown with love." In the distance, a car engine rumbled past on the main road. Tessa's jaw clenched. She had chosen this life to give Annie a sense of normalcy and safety. But if anyone thought they could take that away, they were about to learn why she had earned the codename Ghost during her service. Not a single target had ever seen her coming. The next morning, Tessa arrived at the Wilkins farmhouse. The scent of fresh apple pie filled the air, but there was tension around the worn oak table where Hank and Martha sat. Martha's hands trembled slightly as she set out coffee cups. "These were taken 2 days ago," Hank said, spreading several grainy photographs across the table. "Over at the old Morgan property." Tessa leaned in. The images showed vehicles, SUVs like the one she had seen, along with shadowy figures loading crates into an abandoned barn. "Drug runners have been using that place for months," Hank continued. "But they're getting bolder." Tessa's jaw tightened as her eyes landed on a familiar face in one of the photos. "The man who visited my stand yesterday," she said. Hank nodded grimly. "Dante Ruiz. They call him El Aguila. He's rising fast in the Scorpions cartel. Word is, they're setting up new routes, right through Red Creek. Probably right through your property." "Strategic location," Tessa murmured, recalling Dante's words. "You need to be careful, dear," Martha said softly, placing a slice of pie in front of Tessa. "These aren't just common criminals." Tessa's eyes hardened. "I know exactly what they are." Hank and Martha exchanged a glance. They'd never asked Tessa for details about her military past, but they had their suspicions. The conversation was interrupted by a text on Tessa's phone. It was from Dr. Kelly Park, who was watching Annie for the morning. "Your daughter's asking when you'll be back. She's got big plans for the stand today." Hank gathered the photos. "Take the back roads on your way home." "And Tessa," he gave her a serious look, "we've got your back." Later that morning, unwelcome visitors arrived at Annie's stand. 2 men stepped out of a black SUV, their casual attire doing little to mask their hardened demeanor. "Beautiful morning," the taller one said, picking up a tomato and inspecting it with exaggerated interest. "Your mother around, little one?" Before Annie could respond, Tessa emerged from behind the stand, having been hidden while tending the garden. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" The shorter man smiled, revealing a gold tooth. "Just admiring your produce. Though we heard you might have other business opportunities to discuss." "I believe I made my position clear yesterday," Tessa said evenly. The taller man set the tomato down and took a step closer. "Sometimes it's wise to reconsider. After all, accidents can happen on a farm. It'd be a shame if someone got hurt." Tessa's eyes narrowed imperceptibly. "Is that a threat?" Of course not, the gold-toothed man replied with a chuckle. Just a friendly warning. Tessa stepped forward, her gaze steady and unflinching. Let me give you a warning of my own. You and your friends? You're trespassing, and I don't take kindly to trespassers. For a moment, neither man moved. Then the taller one smirked and motioned to his partner. We'll be seeing you, ma'am. They climbed back into the SUV and drove off, dust kicking up behind them. Tessa exhaled slowly, then turned to Annie. How about we head inside for a break, sweetheart? Annie nodded, sensing her mother's tension but not fully understanding it. As they walked toward the house, Tessa's mind raced. She had seen the look in those men's eyes before, predators testing boundaries. But they had just made a fatal error. They had no idea who they were dealing with. Tessa's stance remained calm, but her instincts screamed warnings. Years of combat training alerted her to the way the two men subtly positioned themselves for maximum visibility and control. Their hand placement, line of sight, and proximity to exit spoke volumes. Positions can change, the taller man said smoothly, his voice laced with menace. Especially when people understand the consequences of stubbornness. Before Tessa could reply, a truck appeared around the bend, Father O'Malley's old Ford. The priest's timing was impeccable, as always. The men exchanged glances and retreated to their vehicle with forced smiles. Lovely tomatoes today, Annie. Father O'Malley called out as he parked. I'll take a basket for the church kitchen. His eyes met Tessa's with a knowing look, concern simmering beneath his genial expression. Later that afternoon, Deputy Carmen Diaz arrived under the guise of a routine patrol. Heard some complaints about suspicious vehicles, she said casually. Noticed anything unusual? Nothing worth reporting, Tessa replied, catching the deputy's subtle hint. They were building a case, but they needed more evidence. That night, after securing the house and checking on Annie, Tessa retrieved the rifle case from beneath her floorboards. The weapon inside had seen her through 3 tours of duty, earning commendations she never displayed. She cleaned it methodically, muscle memory guiding each movement. A faint noise outside caught her attention. Moving silently to the window, she spotted a figure near the equipment shed, taking photos of the property. Her phone buzzed, a text from Hank. They're watching 8 other farms too. Something big's coming. Her reply was brief. Keep Annie safe. I'll be doing recon tomorrow. The next day brought an influx of customers to the produce stand. Tessa noted the unfamiliar faces and observed their movements. Vehicles parked strategically, quick glances exchanged, and 2 casual snapshots of the area. Mama, Annie said quietly during a lull. Those men yesterday weren't really interested in vegetables, were they? Tessa knelt beside her daughter, heart aching at her perceptiveness. No, honey, but you don't need to worry about them. Remember what I taught you about the safe room? Annie nodded. Under the stairs, behind the fake wall. Lock the door and use the special phone. Wait for you, Uncle Hank, or Deputy Carmen. That's my girl. Tessa hugged her tightly, already formulating her next steps. She had chosen this life to protect Annie, but she would die before letting anyone threaten it. Later, Father O'Malley stopped by again, bringing thinly veiled news. The parish council's concerned about recent activities, he said, voice low. We're organizing neighborhood watches. Tessa understood the message. The community was mobilizing. The cartel's presence was no longer a secret. That evening, she drove Annie to her art class, taking a circuitous route and watching for tails. Outside the community center, she noticed one of Ruiz's lieutenants, Oscar Valdez, sitting in a parked car. Remember, Tessa told Annie, Miss Ruth will walk you home today. I've got errands to run. Those errands involved documenting cartel movements, though Annie didn't need to know that. 3 hours later, Tessa's suspicions were confirmed. The cartel wasn't passing through. They were establishing a permanent operation. Her farm was a critical part of their plans. Hank's text that evening was grim. They've bought off some locals. Lines are being drawn. Tessa stood in her darkened kitchen, watching headlights sweep across the distant road. Soon, she would have to make a choice, run or fight. But running would mean abandoning the community to the cartel's control. Her phone lit up with a message from Annie, a photo of a drawing she'd made in class. It showed the vegetable stand, a smiling stick figure, and the words, Best mama ever. Tessa's decision crystallized. She had left violence behind for Annie's sake, but for Annie's sake, she would embrace it again if necessary. The cartel thought they were dealing with a simple farmer. They were about to learn how wrong they were. At dawn, Tessa moved silently through the western tree line of her property. She had spent the night tracking the cartel's movements. 3 more vehicles had passed by, 2 carrying weapons, according to her thermal scope. The old military equipment she had stashed under the floorboards was proving invaluable. A twig snapped behind her. Instantly, Tessa pressed herself against a tree, listening intently. Area 4 secure. No signs of surveillance, a man whispered in Spanish. Tessa allowed herself a grim smile. 5 years of civilian life hadn't dulled her skills or her understanding of cartel communications. Back at the house, Annie was already awake, arranging vegetables for the day's sales. Mama, you look tired. Were you checking the irrigation system again? Something like that, sweetheart. Tessa kissed her daughter's forehead. If anyone asks, I was up early working in the greenhouse. Deputy Carmen's patrol car pulled up as they finished setting up the stand. Her relaxed demeanor didn't fool Tessa. Quite a night, Carmen said softly, pretending to inspect a basket of tomatoes. 3 reports of armed men on private property. Sheriffs getting pressure from higher-ups to look the other way. Tessa's expression remained neutral. Penny, honey, she said, why don't you go grab some of those special bell peppers from the barn for Deputy Carmen? Once Annie was out of earshot, Carmen's voice hardened. DEA's involved, but they've got a leak. Whatever's coming is bigger than we thought. The cartel's pouring serious resources into this. They're mapping the entire area. I've counted 12 men, Tessa confirmed. Probably more. These aren't just street-level thugs. They've got professionals. A black SUV rolled by, slowing deliberately as it passed the stand. Carmen straightened, her hand casually resting near her holstered weapon. The vehicle continued down the road, but the message was clear. They were watching. They're testing us, Carmen muttered. Let them, Tessa replied, her voice cold and steady. They have no idea what they've started. Property. They were talking in Spanish. I couldn't understand all of it, but they said something about tomorrow night. Jasmine knelt down to look Penny in the eyes, her expression softening despite the storm brewing inside her. You did good, sweetheart. You're brave and you're smart. Remember, we've got a plan, and nothing's going to happen to you. I promise. Penny nodded, though worry lingered in her gaze. Jasmine hugged her tightly before standing. As Penny returned to arranging the produce stand, Jasmine scanned the road and tree line. The men in the black SUV weren't far. Their passes had become more frequent, and she knew they were gauging her movements, trying to intimidate her. By late afternoon, Dr. Marcus Park stopped by with his young son, Noah. The children played by the porch while Dr. Park spoke quietly with Jasmine. His voice was calm but deliberate. I brought some extra medical supplies, combat-ready stuff, just in case anyone needs it. Jasmine nodded in appreciation. Marcus had served as a combat medic. He knew what was coming. His eyes darted to the tree line, ever watchful. Thanks, Jasmine said. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. Hope is good, he replied, but preparation is better. The afternoon brought more trouble. 2 men arrived in a shiny black sedan, wearing expensive suits that stood out like a sore thumb in farm country. Their stride was too confident, their gazes too cold. Penny tensed but kept her composure, remembering her mother's instructions to act natural. Miss Reynolds, the older man greeted, his smile tight and devoid of warmth. Mr. Ruiz sends his regards and a message. Tomorrow night, your farm will receive some visitors. Important business decisions need to be made. My property isn't open for business discussions, Jasmine replied evenly. She noted their subtle hand placements. Both men were armed. This isn't a request, Miss Reynolds. Mr. Ruiz values family. It would be unfortunate if anything disrupted your daughter's charming little business here. Time slowed for Jasmine as she assessed the situation. She needed to de-escalate, for now. Not here, not with Penny watching. I'll consider his message, she said carefully. The men exchanged glances and left without further comment. Their departure coincided with Chester's arrival in his truck. He had heard enough to piece things together. It's happening, isn't it? He asked grimly. Jasmine gave a subtle nod. Get word to Father O'Malley. If things go bad, the church basement might need to shelter some families. That evening, after securing Penny safely at the Wilkins house with Daisy, Jasmine made a call she had hoped never to make again. The secure line connected to Fort Benning. Ghost checking in, she said quietly. Calling in that favor, Colonel. The response was immediate. Assets are available. Unofficial capacity only. Timeline? 24 hours. Maybe less. Full tactical situation developing. Understood. Watch for friendly shadows. As night fell over Birch Hollow, cartel activity intensified. Jasmine's thermal scope revealed 3 observation posts being established around her property. These were no amateurs. They were organized and well-trained. But they had never faced someone like her. In the barn, beneath layers of farming equipment, Jasmine accessed her cache of weapons and gear. Everything was impeccably maintained despite years of disuse. Each piece carried memories of operations in Afghanistan, Iraq, and other places she never spoke of. Her phone buzzed. It was Carmen. Sheriff's been ordered to pull patrols from your area tomorrow night. We're on our own. A second message followed, this one from Chester. Community meeting at the church tomorrow morning. Lines are being drawn. Jasmine moved silently through her house, testing security measures she had installed long ago. Reinforced doors, a safe room hidden behind the stairs, an escape tunnel in the cellar. In Penny's room, her daughter slept peacefully, clutching the stuffed bear Jasmine had given her after leaving the service. On the bedside table sat a framed photo of Penny at the produce stand, beaming with pride. Jasmine's jaw tightened. Tomorrow would change everything. The cartel thought they were moving against a simple farmer. Instead, they were about to face a mother defending her child. And they were going to learn why soldiers had once feared the operative known only as Ghost. The next morning, St. Thomas Church was packed. The air was thick with tension as Father O'Malley addressed the gathered crowd. Our community faces troubled times, he began, carefully choosing his words. Some of our neighbors have reported concerning activities. A man stood up, David Martinez, a recent arrival claiming to be a businessman. These outsiders bring opportunity, investment, progress, he argued, his eyes flicking toward a few cartel representatives at the back of the room. Progress doesn't come with guns, Chester countered, his voice steady and authoritative. Or threats against children. The room erupted into heated debate. Jasmine stayed silent, observing. She identified 3 cartel allies, 2 likely informants, and several frightened farmers who might cooperate out of fear. Outside, a stranger in military-style boots gave her a subtle nod as she passed. One of the colonel's shadows had arrived. Help was quietly positioning itself. Back at the farm, Penny struggled to keep up a brave face as she managed the produce stand. Mama, those men in the black car keep driving past. They're scaring the customers away, she said softly. Jasmine's heart clenched, but her voice remained calm. Just focus on your vegetables, sweetheart. Remember what to do if anything feels wrong. Get to the safe room. Wait for your signal, Penny whispered. Mama, I heard them last night. They were walking around outside, talking in Spanish. Jasmine inhaled deeply to steady herself. You did exactly the right thing. Don't worry, they won't be walking around here much longer. She kissed Penny's forehead, her mind already calculating the next move. The lines had been drawn. The time for warnings was over. The cartel thought they could intimidate a single mother. They had no idea they were about to face a warrior who had outmaneuvered entire battalions. Tomorrow night, they would find out just how wrong they were. Darkness. The night truly belonged to Jasmine now. From her elevated position, Jasmine controlled the battlefield. The cartel soldiers hesitated for a moment, their night vision equipment struggling to adjust after the sudden loss of light. Their confusion deepened when a second shot rang out, shattering the nearest SUV's windshield. Contact. Move. Move. Val shouted, his voice tight with tension. The soldiers scattered, attempting to reposition, but Jasmine was already ahead of them. She used every advantage her land offered, trees, uneven terrain, and her carefully prepared traps. Another shot echoed in the dark. One of the cartel's vehicles hissed as its tires deflated, the sharp pop of rubber punctuated by cursing in Spanish. Perimeter compromised, a voice crackled over Val's radio. We've lost visual. Request backup. Jasmine's radio softly came to life. Shadow team in position, a calm voice informed her. They're starting to panic. Good, Jasmine whispered. She adjusted her position in the loft, scanning with her thermal scope. Another squad was creeping toward the barn. Team 1, west flank. Val ordered, desperation creeping into his voice. 2 of the cartel soldiers approached the barn cautiously, weapons raised. Jasmine allowed them to get close, too close, before springing her trap. A flash grenade hidden under the loose soil detonated, temporarily blinding and disorienting them. They staggered back, firing blindly into the dark. From the treeline, one of the colonel's shadows picked them off with non-lethal shots, leaving them incapacitated. At the farmhouse, Ruiz grew increasingly impatient. He leaned out of the SUV window, barking orders into his radio. Oscar, get control of the situation. We're losing too many men for this to be one damn farm. He had underestimated her, just as many had before him. Jasmine moved quickly and silently, using the chaos to her advantage. Through her earpiece, Chester's voice came in. Carmen's got patrol routes locked down. No reinforcements are coming tonight. Understood, she replied. Let's finish this. Oscar Val regrouped near the equipment shed with the remaining soldiers. His radio squawked with more bad news. Communications had been fully severed. He clenched his teeth. She's hunting us, he muttered. No kidding, one of his men said nervously, glancing around the shadows. Hold your ground, Val snapped. She can't take us all. Before he could finish, a shadow moved behind them. Jasmine struck swiftly and silently, disabling 2 more soldiers in quick succession. The others panicked, firing wildly into the darkness. You're wasting ammo, Jasmine's voice echoed through the property, projected from hidden speakers she had installed earlier. You're not leaving here unless I let you. Get back to the vehicles, Val ordered. They're already disabled, Jasmine's voice taunted. You really should have done your homework. The cartel soldiers stumbled back toward their convoy, only to find that Jasmine had methodically taken out every operational vehicle. The road was blocked by the broken-down truck, one more tactical trap designed to funnel them exactly where she wanted. From her perch, Jasmine watched as Ruiz finally stepped out of the SUV, his polished shoes crunching on gravel. He surveyed the scene with a mixture of fury and disbelief. You think you can scare me? Ruiz shouted into the night. We own this county. We'll burn it to the ground if we have to. Jasmine's voice came again, low and dangerous. Threaten my daughter again, and you'll never leave this farm alive. Ruiz froze, sensing the shift. For the first time, doubt flickered across his face. A flurry of motion erupted as the remaining cartel soldiers tried to retreat. Jasmine coordinated with the Shadow team, using precision strikes to disable or capture every last one of them. By the time dawn's first light broke over Birch Hollow, the battle was over. Chester arrived with Carmen and a few trusted deputies, who began rounding up the captured men. Ruiz, defiant to the end, was handcuffed and led to a patrol car. He sneered at Jasmine as he passed. This isn't over, he hissed. Jasmine met his gaze with cold fury. Yes, it is. Later that morning, Penny returned home, escorted by Father O'Malley and Daisy. She ran straight into her mother's arms. Is it over, Mama? She asked softly. Jasmine nodded, holding her daughter tightly. Yes, baby. It's over. As they walked back to the farmhouse, Penny glanced at the produce stand. Despite the chaos of the previous night, the little chalkboard sign she had made was still standing. Annie's amazing produce grown with love. For the first time in what felt like days, Jasmine allowed herself a small smile. The cartel had learned the hard way that some battles weren't worth fighting. Oak Valley had stood its ground, and a mother's love had proven more powerful than any threat. Jasmine's gaze remained locked on Ruiz as he strode confidently across her property, flanked by heavily armed men. These weren't the same cartel enforcers from the night before. These men had military-grade training, their movements coordinated and deliberate. Through her scope, she observed the way they secured positions around her driveway, efficiently covering all angles. Ruiz had brought in specialists. Her radio crackled softly. Ghost, they've got teams moving on your north and east perimeters. We count 8 more approaching from the south. They're converging. It was one of the Colonel's shadows, providing real-time updates. Understood, Jasmine whispered. She tracked Ruiz through the crosshairs of her scope as he stopped in the center of the yard, arms outstretched in mock diplomacy. Miss Reynolds, he called out, his voice carrying easily in the cool night air. You've impressed me. Few people earn my personal attention like this. But here we are. I'm a reasonable man, though. Surrender now, and your daughter stays safe. Jasmine's lips tightened as she heard the veiled threat. The mere mention of Penny hardened her resolve. These men had made a fatal mistake by thinking intimidation would work. Inside the farmhouse, Penny huddled in the hidden safe room beneath the stairs, just as she had practiced. Her heart raced, but she focused on the breathing exercises her mother had taught her. Above her, she could faintly hear muffled voices. She whispered into the secure phone Jasmine had given her. Mama, I'm in the room. I locked it. Good girl, Jasmine's voice replied softly. Stay there and don't come out until I say. You remember the plan? Yes, ma'am, Penny said, her voice steady despite the fear in her chest. Stay quiet. Wait for your signal. Back outside, Ruiz continued his monologue. You're outnumbered, outgunned. You can't win this, but I'm offering you a way out. Walk away, and no one else gets hurt. Jasmine finally spoke, her voice low and calm. Funny, last night you were screaming that you'd kill me and my daughter. Now you want to negotiate. Ruiz's eyes narrowed, the smug smile fading slightly. Don't be foolish. You fought well, but this is over. You think you can stand against my men with your little tricks? We've upgraded. New gear. New tactics. New tactics, same arrogance, Jasmine muttered under her breath. Her radio crackled again. South perimeter team neutralized. For down, no injuries on our side. Shadows are holding position. Confirmed, another voice chimed in. North perimeter softened. 2 more hostiles intercepted. Jasmine's mind raced through her options. Ruiz had brought in extra muscle, but she still had the home field advantage. She had spent weeks planning for this escalation, setting traps and fallback points across the entire property. Now it was time to execute. You made a mistake coming back here, Ruiz, she said over the speakers hidden around the yard. This land isn't yours to take. It never will be. Defiant to the end, huh? Ruiz scoffed. He raised a hand, signaling his men to advance. Fine. Let's end this. The first team approached the barn cautiously, scanning for traps. They had learned from the previous night, using drones and thermal scanners to check for movement. But Jasmine had anticipated this and adjusted her defenses accordingly. A tripwire activated just as 2 men reached the barn's main entrance, triggering a flashbang that sent them reeling. Gunshots rang out as one of the Colonel's shadows fired from the tree line, incapacitating them before they could recover. Barn entrance secure, a voice reported over Jasmine's radio. At the same time, a second team moved toward the farmhouse, their boots crunching softly on gravel. Jasmine watched from her position in the upper loft of the equipment shed, her scope following their every move. The lead soldier raised a hand, signaling his unit to halt. He was cautious, experienced. She's got eyes on us, he murmured to his men. Jasmine smirked. Damn right I do. She fired a single shot, not at the men but at a power junction box near the house. Sparks flew, and the surrounding area plunged into darkness. Their night vision equipment flickered and reset, giving her a crucial few seconds of confusion to act. She moved swiftly, repositioning to a new vantage point. Another shot rang out, shattering the window of one of Ruiz's SUVs. Inside, Ruiz ducked, cursing as glass showered over him. Get her, he shouted, his voice cracking with frustration. Meanwhile, Chester and Carmen coordinated the town's response from Father Patrick's church. Families had sought shelter there overnight, and the church basement had been turned into an impromptu command center. Chester's voice came through Jasmine's earpiece. We've got your flanks covered. State police are staying out of this mess, but local boys are on standby if needed. Dr. Park's station is ready for any wounded. Good, Jasmine replied. Keep them safe. I'll handle things here. The cartel's assault began to unravel as the minutes passed. Jasmine's precision tactics continued to sow confusion and fear among the attackers. Ruiz's forces, despite their training, struggled to adapt to the guerrilla-style defenses she had set up. Finally, Ruiz's lieutenant, Val, barked into his radio. "We need extraction. This is a trap." "No extraction," Jasmine's voice cut in over their frequency, calm and deadly. "This is your last warning. Leave now, or you won't leave at all." Ruiz's fury boiled over. "Enough of this. Kill her," he screamed. But his men hesitated. They had seen enough to know that Jasmine Reynolds was no ordinary farmer. She was something else entirely, something far more dangerous. One by one, the cartel operatives began to retreat, dragging their wounded with them. Vehicles roared to life as they sped away, leaving Ruiz standing alone in the center of the yard. He looked around in disbelief as his empire crumbled around him. Jasmine stepped out from the shadows, her rifle trained on him. "End of the line, Ruiz," she said quietly. "You lost." He sneered, trying to summon bravado. "You think this is over? My people." "Your people ran," Jasmine interrupted. "And the ones who didn't are in custody or too scared to come back. It's over." Ruiz glared at her, his pride refusing to accept defeat. But deep down, he knew she was right. Sirens echoed in the distance. Chester's deputies were closing in. "Get out," Jasmine ordered. "Don't ever come back." With a final curse, Ruiz climbed into the last functioning SUV and sped away into the dawn. By the time the sun fully rose over Birch Hollow, peace had returned. Jasmine stood in the middle of her property, surveying the aftermath. Penny ran out to meet her, throwing her arms around her waist. "It's okay now, baby," Jasmine whispered, holding her close. "It's over." But deep down, she knew it wasn't over completely. There would always be threats. But as long as she was there, no one would ever harm her family again. Not without facing the full fury of the ghost. Entrance, a calculated risk she had taken to lure in Ruiz's men. But they had exploited it in a way she hadn't expected. Now, someone was inside the house, threatening the one thing she fought hardest to protect. Jasmine's voice remained calm despite the storm raging inside her. "Stay quiet, baby. Stay hidden. Remember the drills?" "Yes, Mama," Penny whispered. The line went silent. Jasmine took a deep breath, her mind racing. One intruder inside. Primary assault still engaged on the front. She adjusted her tactics on the fly, touching her radio. "Chester, cover the perimeter. Shadows, tighten the net. I need 2 operators to secure my house." "Code Black." "Copy that, Ghost," one of the colonel's men replied. "We're on it." Jasmine's focus shifted to Val, Ruiz's lieutenant, who had repositioned himself near the eastern tree line. Through her scope, she watched him issue commands to a group of armed reinforcements. His radio squawked with garbled reports of their men being pinned down or incapacitated by smoke traps. "Team 1, what's your status?" Val demanded, his frustration clear. No response came. Jasmine knew why. Those men were either unconscious or too disoriented to reply. She marked Val as her next target. If she could disrupt their leadership structure further, the entire operation would collapse. Her finger tightened on the trigger, but a burst of static came through her earpiece. "We have movement inside." Sweeping now. Inside the house, the cartel operative moved with careful precision. He was ex-military, likely trained in urban combat. He scanned each corner with a tactical flashlight, the beam cutting through the darkness of the hallway leading to the safe room. In the hidden chamber, Penny crouched low, clutching the small emergency phone in one hand and the handle of the safe room's inner lock in the other. She could hear footsteps approaching, slow and deliberate. "Come on out, little one," the man called softly, his voice laced with menace. "I don't want to hurt you. We just need to talk." Penny's heart pounded in her chest, but she remembered her mother's words. "Stay calm. Trust the plan." She remained silent, her breathing shallow, listening as the footsteps drew closer. The man tested each door along the hallway, moving steadily toward her hiding place. "Move faster," Jasmine hissed into the radio. "I need those operators inside now." 2 minutes out, came the reply. 2 minutes felt like an eternity. Jasmine knew she couldn't wait. She shifted her position, abandoning the equipment shed and moving swiftly across the property. She stayed low, her silhouette blending seamlessly into the terrain as she bypassed two groups of disoriented cartel soldiers. At the farmhouse, she entered through a side entrance, her suppressed pistol drawn. The house was dark, but she needed no light. Every inch of the building had been meticulously prepared, with fallback points and vantage spots designed to give her the upper hand. She heard him before she saw him, the faint creak of a floorboard near the stairs. Jasmine positioned herself at the corner of the hallway, waiting. When the operative's shadow stretched into view, she acted with lightning speed. A flash of movement, a swift strike to the wrist, and his weapon clattered to the floor. The man spun, throwing a punch, but Jasmine ducked and countered with a brutal elbow to his ribs. He staggered, gasping, before she swept his legs out from under him. The fight ended as quickly as it began. Within seconds, the man lay on the ground, zip-tied and disarmed. "You made a mistake coming into my house," Jasmine whispered coldly. He struggled briefly but froze when he felt the barrel of her pistol press against his temple. "Ghost?" he muttered in disbelief, recognizing the name from whispered rumors in the criminal underworld. Jasmine didn't reply. Instead, she spoke into her radio. "Intruder neutralized. Safe room secure." "Copy." The colonel's shadow confirmed. "We've got the perimeter under control. Reinforcements are retreating." Jasmine knelt beside the man, her voice low and deadly. "You have one chance to live. Tell your boss this isn't his county anymore." The man nodded quickly, terror in his eyes. Jasmine hauled him to his feet and shoved him toward the back door, where one of the colonel's operators took custody of him. Penny emerged from the safe room moments later, tears welling in her eyes. "Mama!" Jasmine dropped to her knees and hugged her tightly. "I'm here, baby. You're safe now. It's all over." "You scared him," Penny whispered, her voice trembling. "He called you Ghost. Why do they call you that?" Jasmine hesitated for a moment, then gently stroked Penny's hair. "Because I make bad people disappear, and I'll always be here to protect you." Outside, Ruiz's operation was in shambles. His men were scattered, many of them captured or incapacitated. Vehicles sped away from the property in a chaotic retreat. Val was among them, barking into a broken radio as his convoy tore down the backroads. Chester's voice came over the local police frequency. "Convoys moving out of town. We'll keep an eye on their movements. Looks like they're headed south." Deputy Carmen added, "State police are finally stepping in. We've got backup moving to intercept them before they cross the border." Jasmine exhaled slowly. The immediate threat had been neutralized, but she knew this wasn't over. People like Ruiz didn't give up easily. There would be more battles to fight. But for now, Oak Valley was safe. She stood on the front porch of the farmhouse, watching the sunrise break over the horizon. Penny stood beside her, holding her hand. "We're okay now, right, Mama?" Penny asked softly. Jasmine nodded, squeezing her daughter's hand gently. "Yeah, sweetheart. We're okay." The cartel had learned the hard way. Some lines shouldn't be crossed. In trying to intimidate a simple farmer, they had awakened something far more dangerous. And if they ever came back, they would face the full wrath of the Ghost.